Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about user flows, how I build them, why I build them, and I'm also going to be doing a quick demo of a product that my company uses, which is called Overflow. And this video is not sponsored by them in any way, but this is a tool that I use pretty frequently, so I just wanted to give a candid review. So let's get started. So first of all, what exactly is a user flow? Well, it's a visualization of how your users navigate across your product to achieve a certain goal, and it tracks all the different paths that they can take, as well as any interactions that they might have along the way. Now, as you're building these user flows, you might find that users don't always start and end in the same path. So for example, a user might actually get to your product, your website, through a Google search, or it might be through clicking on an advertisement. So their entry and exit points might vary. My company creates user flows so that we can map out exactly how our users are interacting with our product along the way. And it also helps us plan out which screens we would need to design. And also, it just helps us lay out the overall flow so that we have a visualization and can see whether or not, there are certain points within the flow that can be simplified. Are there any steps that we can cut out along the way to make it easier for the user? And it also acts as a point of reference and kind of like a guide for both our engineers and also our customer success teams. Like I said before, today I'm going to be going over a piece of software that my company uses to build out these user flows. But you can always just start off with pen and paper. I never begin to draw any wireframes until I have a user flow down, because I don't want to box myself into any ideas. If I'm already, thinking about how the overall screen is going to look, then I'm not looking at it from a big picture perspective, which is how does this one individual screen fit in with the overall process that a user is going through. Okay, so let's get started with demoing Overflow. So like I mentioned before, Overflow is actually a software that you have to download onto your desktop, and you can start for free. I think they have like a 30-day trial, and it also works with XD, Sketch, Figma, and Photoshop, which I'm going to go over later on. And it also runs on both Macs and Windows. If you ask me, one of the major downsides of Overflow is definitely the fact that you need to download and install the software onto your machine. Whereas, a lot of web apps today, like Figma, they have a browser version where you can just start in one machine and then pick up where you left off in your work on a different machine. And it's just a lot more flexible that way. So I'm not too big of a fan of, Overflow having to have you download their desktop app every time. So what I did is I created a flow map based on one of the projects that I had worked on during UX Bootcamp. And let me show you how it works within Overflow. All right, zooming in. So I always start off by building a key. So a key can be, a page, an action, a decision point, kind of like what you see over here. Each one of these is indicated by a different shape or color, and it just helps the viewer of your user flow map understand how to navigate through it. Overflow actually has a few shapes that you can choose from. If you hit the plus icon and then go into shapes, there's a rectangle, diamond, and an oval. Now, this might seem kind of limited. A lot of its competitors actually have a huge pattern or shape library, but I'm actually a fan of the fact that it's a little more limited, because I feel like if you have 15 to 20 shapes on your user flow map, it actually makes it way more confusing and difficult for someone to navigate through it. So typically I just stay to a few shapes and just alter the colors a bit. So in every flow map, you want to start off with a user story, which basically tells me what the end user is actually trying to achieve and what we're mapping. So in this particular example, my persona wants to sign up for a remote live stream workout class, and she prefers to take a session taught by her regular gym instructor and wonders if she has any available. So let's start off with the flow map. At the beginning, you see that the user is going to land on the live sessions page, and you know that it's a page because of the key that we've already established over here. So what I usually do is just copy and paste this and drag it on to the flow map somewhere, wherever there's a page. And at the top over here, you can also, again, modify the styling of your shapes. So for example, if you go into shape properties, you can change the radius of it, the fill color, border, and also the weight of the border, and even the line style. Even though you're somewhat limited by the number of shapes that are available, you can certainly style it in such a way that they're distinguishable. If I want to change any of the copy within my shapes, it's pretty simple to do so. All I gotta do is tap into the shape, double click, and then I can even edit the font up here, or the font weight, the sizing, padding, leading, text color, quite a few options actually. So, you know, if I want to change this to hello, I can do so very easily. Probably doesn't come as a surprise, but I can type a lot faster than I can write. So I can speed up the process way more and, you know, be able to just throw some shapes against the board and try some things out and move connectors and shapes around. You'll see that we have different arrows coming out of these shapes, right? So if you hover over any one of these shapes that you've created, there are actually different points that you can drag out an arrow from. So for example, if I want to connect this shape with search bar, I can do so here. And then you can also just adjust these lines or these connectors however you want. All right, so I'm gonna undo this. And then you can also move it around, and these connectors actually follow the shapes. If you were to connect one decision point, for example, or any other shape you want, you can also drag the arrow there. And then if you double tap on the arrow, you can add something else, like, do I want to search for a specific instructor? Yes or no, right? So this points me to different paths. And if I want to double click this, yep, so I can say no over here if I wanted to, or I can type in anything else. So yeah, it's pretty flexible in that regards, and you can even change some of these connectors and style them as well. So if you want to modify the color, the weight, the start and endpoint arrows. If you have been trying to build user flows with, say, Sketch or Figma, you'll know that this is way easier. You don't have to tediously draw in every single one of these arrows and connect them. So one of the questions I get asked a lot is exactly how specific do I need to make my user flow map? Do I need to record every micro interaction? Let's take a look at an example and see how that works. So over here, you see that I have sign up as a user action, but notice that I didn't go into detail about things like input email, input password, input first name, last name, those kind of things. Once we do drag in the high fidelity wireframes, you'll see later on, can kind of cover all of that. Think about what the person who is viewing your user flow is trying to accomplish. You know, do they really need to understand all the different input fields that they can put in? Or are they just trying to understand, how do I get from point A to point B? And can you break it down in the simplest way possible? How granular you want to get really depends on your project and your audience. Most of the time, I would say just keep it simple and cover some of the major steps that the user is taking along the way. Usually, I also put things that are happening concurrently on the same level. So right over here, you see that, you know, after you've included your payment info, or, you know, if you wish to donate, or if you don't, then you get a confirmation page. And let's say, you know, at the same time that you are landing on this confirmation page, you're also getting an email. So something like that, I would probably put right next to it and connect both of these points too. So for example, receive an email or receive a confirmation email. So For something like this, because it's an external source, it's technically not within your product. I would probably include something separate in the key to indicate a different style for these external interactions. Again, the purpose of a user flow map is to be able to lay out all the possible paths that your user can take, but you definitely want it to be as clean as possible so that whoever's looking at it isn't going to get lost in all the lines. So for example, let's say here it says, did I find any classes by my instructor? If not, then it goes back up to the live session. And also here, do I want to search for a specific instructor? It's also no, and it leads back to the same path. So over here, you see that these two paths are actually overlapping. And part of the reason for that is just, it's easier for your eye to follow this line back to live sessions, and this one is going along the same route. Then say, if I were to move this, so if I were to click on this path, hold onto this connector and drag it over to this side, and maybe this connector, I want to drag it onto that side. So now, the person who's looking at your flow map has two different areas that they need to concentrate on. So there's one path leading here and another path going this way. And they both go to live sessions anyway. So yeah, what I like to do is, if there are two paths that have the same destination, just allow them to overlap so that it's easier to guide the eye along the way. One of the things that you can do in Overflow to keep things more organized is tap into this thing called the boards panel. All right, so here you can create a new board, or you can also right click on what you currently have and duplicate it. Usually I create multiple boards in one Overflow file if I am able to fit them all in one category. This way, if I'm trying to pass along a file to someone to review, they don't need to receive like 10 different Overflow documents, and I can just send them one with 10 different boards. And this way you can also split your user flow into more digestible, smaller segments instead of having a giant map, even though Overflow does provide you with an infinite canvas. But again, the purpose of a user flow map is to make it easy for whoever's looking at it to follow a path and understand, what journey the user is taking. Splitting it into smaller chunks makes it a lot easier to follow. Think about it. If Amazon only had one flow map and they tried to throw everything in there, it's going to be a mess. It's going to be chaotic, and you're not going to be able to see, for example, how does a user reference orders that they've made in the past? How do they check their orders? And then you're going to have to sift through everything within the map to try to find that one interaction. So break it down if you are able to. So I indicated before that Overflow integrates with Figma, Sketch, Adobe XD, and Photoshop. And that's actually one of the major selling points of this product. And I'll admit that's a huge part of the reason why my team is using it, because the final flow map just looks way better and adds a lot more context. So let me show you what I mean. Over here, I'm looking at my Figma file. Now I already have the Overflow plugin installed, but if you don't have it and you want to use it with Overflow, all you gotta do is browse the plugin in the community and look for it, and then just install it. So it's going to show up here. And let's say I want to bring this board or this frame into my Overflow. So what I do is right click, go to plugins, go to Overflow, select it. And over here, I can even choose the export density. So for example, if I want it to be more high quality, a larger file, I can also do 3x, and the pixel density is going to, just increase. If I want to keep the file size a bit smaller, I could do 1x, and all I have to do is tap sync to Overflow. All right, so I already have some screens here, but as you can see, here I can select which file I want to sync it to, and also which board within the file. So I'm going to sync it here into Overflow. All right, so again, I've already brought this in before, but one important thing to note is that the way that Overflow integrates with Figma and the way that it's able to detect which board to update is based on the name of your frame. So over here it says search, and I just need to make sure that in my Figma file I do not change this title, or if I do change it there, then I also update it within Overflow so it's able to detect which one to sync up to. You can see how having these screens on my flow map actually adds a lot more context. So if I'm sharing this with a customer service rep, or if I'm sharing this with someone from engineering, I can show them exactly how the screen is supposed to look and which button they're supposed to click onto. So for example, over here, you'll see that if I zoom in within Figma, I have these broken down into different components, but Overflow is actually able to pick up the layer and detect that this button is an individual element, and you can connect it to the next screen in this way. So pretty cool. Same thing with, say, the search bar. Yep, over here, or even the X icon. Typically, you could use Overflow for building prototypes as well, but personally, I still prefer Figma because it's more tightly integrated with my actual design file. So, I usually just use Overflow for a visualization of the flow map. Another great thing about being able to integrate directly with Figma is that if I ever make any changes to this particular frame, so maybe instead of search results, I want to say results, then all I have to do is edit the copy within my Figma file and then just resync it to Overflow, and then it will update as long as the frame name is the same. This really saves me a lot of time because instead of having to export a PNG or a JPEG and drag it into my user flow map, all I have to do is update everything in Figma, and it cuts out that extra step. Now, the major downside, I would say, is definitely the lack of collaboration. As I mentioned before, Overflow is a desktop application, so because it's not in the browser and you can't just sign in and update it along with someone else on your team, it really makes real-time collaboration kind of impossible. If I make any changes to my Overflow flow map, I have to push it to the cloud by clicking into this icon over here and creating a new share. And then afterwards, someone else who wants to pick up the file and edit it will have to download it from the cloud server onto their own machine and then repeat the process. So this is really clunky, and I hope that Overflow is going to do something about this, because the lack of real-time collaboration basically means that what I use these flow maps for is like a single source of truth to share with my other team members, and it doesn't get updated quite as often. Now, I've talked about the upsides and downsides of Overflow. You can decide for yourself if this is a tool that you would like to use, but again, you can always download a free trial just to play around with it a bit. Other tools that I would recommend are Whimsical, Miro, Lucidchart, and also Creately if you want to, try out different resources for user flow maps. And each of those have, their own pros and cons, but I would say that none of them, as far as I know, have this really tight Figma, Sketch, Adobe XD, and Photoshop integration, which really makes Overflow worth it to me. Just because, like I said, there's being able to have your final wireframes on this map provides so much context to anyone who's taking a look at this. So I hope that gives you some good insight into how I use Overflow with my team, and also, just how I usually build out these flow maps and what their purpose is. Let me know in the comments below how you like to build your flow maps, even if it's just with pen and paper. Nothing wrong with that. All right, until next time, bye.